Again, it's all about removing that friction, removing the work on that audience, and making it as easy as possible for them to take the next step in the journey, right? And all of those things really do matter, and all of those things also, relate to branding in just a way that the brand is perceived.
Welcome to Agents of Change, a podcast about the future of B2B marketing, featuring insights from executives at top agencies. I'm Danielle O'Neill with Leadtail. Let's hop on in. Hi, welcome back to Agents of Change. I'm excited to have with us today Doug Hughmanick. He is the head of creative over at ANML. They are a branding main house, if you will, everything that you need to know about branding and creating your user journey and bringing it together. So we're excited to hear from Doug and hear what he has to offer today.
Hey, Danielle, thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys today, and we'll see what insight I can provide.
Looking forward to it. Let's dive on in. So, Doug, one of the things in an earlier conversation that we talked about, and I loved how you framed this and would love if you can kind of expand upon that, is the branding from the inside out.
Sure.
And what you'd specifically said is if the brand isn't what you say it is, it's what they say it is. And I love that thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that's based off of a Jeff Bezos quote that says, the brand is what people say it is when you're not in the room, or something along those lines. But, I think that the experience in the world that we live in now, everything being so, driven in the digital space, gets more and more important to that brand. And especially with a lot of our clients where their core experience is in that space, their product is digital. It really is being played out in the world of user experience, which we work in. And, if you are not really crafting that user experience to meet those needs, and you're not sort of starting in that realm, as you start to extend outward, that promise can fail, right? If you're marketing something and you get to that core user experience and it doesn't meet the expectations of the user, then, that is really what is going to be reflected poorly upon with your brand. So, for us, a lot of times you'll see that play out in reviews in an app store or something. Like, you might have the most beautiful marketing in the world. You might be able to talk about your product in a way that is really interesting and engaging. But when somebody interacts with that product and it doesn't hold up to that, that's going to be a very poor reflection of your brand. So what we like to do and what we talk about is branding from the inside out, where we really start to work within that core experience. We're really starting to figure out what's the vision for this product. Who are we making this product for? What problems are they having? What's their journey going to be like? And we're thinking through all those things in that space and trying to work through some of those kinks there, and really establishing that foundation, and then, extending that outward, and that doesn't mean that some of the traditional branding bits aren't included in there, but that's kind of where we're starting to play with these assets that we're creating in that experience. And then, as I mentioned, you extend outward from there.
Yeah, I really like that. And so the idea that we're thinking about that user experience looks like with that core experience. So who do you think needs to own that from the internal side?
I mean, from the internal side, I don't think that, there's a specific title necessarily, but there definitely does need to be an owner, whether that's the CMO, whether that's a chief experience officer, whether that's a creative director. Somebody has to be zooming out. Somebody has to be looking at all of these different groups and going, hey, is everybody aligned? Is there cohesion? And that experience that we are creating, is that being communicated consistently in our marketing? Is that vision coming out in our marketing? And I think a lot of the times what happens is, you'll see different groups have different success metrics, and they're trying to meet certain goals. And sometimes, that vision, that overarching vision, can sometimes get lost. And I think that as ANML, as an outside party, with some of our clients, we're able to help with that as well, because we're kind of removed from that day to day, and we get pulled into different areas of our clients' projects. We'll start in product, and then we'll be working on marketing. We might even get involved in packaging design. But usually we're starting that digital space, but we can pull back and see kind of how is this all unfolding. And sometimes you have to really stop and go, wait a second, let's zoom out and let's really see how things are playing out.
Yeah. And what does this look like? So knowing that and knowing that we're working with all of these different departments, how do you work around the idea of, I'm assuming that product has a very different idea than marketing does, than CS does, everything else. So how do you bring all of those together to truly align on what that core experience is?
Well, I think you have to think about the journey. I think you're really thinking about your audience, and you're trying not to think of those as separate, right? You want to think of that experience as one. And how does somebody move from the social media advertisement to the landing page to interacting in your product? So if you're thinking about those journeys in the beginning, then I think you're going to have a lot better luck. And then when you go to work on those individual assets, you kind of know how it plays out in the journey, and hopefully that brings you more success. And if you have that cohesion within let's say the external marketing down to the product, I think you're going to build trust with your audience, and you're going to build a longer lasting relationship if the experience is cohesive throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of thinking about what this all looks like. Something that we had talked about too was the experience of if I'm being portrayed what your product is on social, and then I go to your website and it's a very different experience, that's where you lost me. And,
totally.
We see a lot of that. If we want to change our social voice and we want to be this person, but then everything on their website is still that old branding. So how do you get there?
Yeah, I mean, that's really tricky because you do have a breakdown there, and then you kind of put more work on the user, right? And you're going to compromise their success because you're creating more confusion, right? Your messaging is inconsistent. They've landed there. Now they have, it's kind of a buzzword that we use, but the cognitive load of just figuring out this new language, and whether it's the voice and tone, whether it's the look and feel, you're putting friction into that experience. So I think, again, it's thinking about that journey together as one. The social and the landing page those really need to be one and one, and then into the product, it needs to flow all the way through. So, if you're in the middle of working through that and you want to change your social voice, I think you need to be considering what the voice will be when they land, and I mean, there's ways to do that, gradually, but you've got to make sure that there is some consistency as you cross over.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of that comes into something that you had mentioned earlier too, is the fact that we have to streamline that and streamline that entire user experience. So, from a branding perspective, from Animal's perspective, what are some of these strategies that you would recommend that our listeners use when they're thinking about how to streamline that experience?
I think it is, reducing that friction on the user. It's reducing that cognitive load. It's when you get there, it should feel, if you're coming into a landing page, the experience should feel natural. I should be able to know really what I need to do next as a user. So another element to streamline that is, making an element of personalization. So, it's really relevant to me when I land there, or I can funnel down into an area that's relevant to me very quickly. I think another thing is just, keeping it simple and also making it digestible. We see a lot of the times, just too much content is being put in a user's view too soon, right? It's just too early. There's too much information. So it really needs to be scannable. It needs to be straight to the point and relevant to the person visiting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the idea of thinking about it that way. So when we're thinking of this user experience and streamlining, bringing it all together, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see brands making? And what are some things that you're like, oh my gosh, they killed it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mistakes are just, lacking that consistency, different groups doing different things. I think that, you'll get in there and, the terminology will be just too confusing for people to understand. And sometimes an example that we see often is, just way too many entry points. And it's almost like we designed it to be appealing to everybody. And we have all these different front doors to get into content. So let's say you've got a products menu, you've got a solutions menu, you've got something on the homepage that's an entry point. And your intention was to make that easy and to appeal to all these different audiences. But now you've created confusion because I have 4 different paths that I can go. And I don't know really which one I should be going down. So that can be a little bit confusing. So I think that's a mistake that tends to happen frequently.
Yeah, I agree. That's true. And it's always funny to see where you want me to land.
Yeah.
And that's not relevant to me. So why are you marketing to me here, but then sending me here?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you want it to be very relevant. You want to get them to the content as quickly as possible and really make it frictionless and intuitive. So I think it's very important to make sure that you're thinking through each step of that journey and where this person is going and what they need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now I'd like to move on to another discussion that we had that I'm sure every single person listening to this has run into when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, or in the way that we were talking about it, there's too many specialists on your team. There's a specialist for everything. And now they're starting to butt heads on what their roles are. So, one thing that you'd mentioned was that gets confusing. So how do we remove that confusion, and how do we determine which specialists we actually need?
Yeah, I mean, it does get confusing when you have all those cooks in the kitchen. And I think, one thing that's worked for us and I think it's made our work stronger is to have people that have a range of skill sets that can think about the entirety of that project. So you're not getting breakdown as it's passed from group to group. Obviously, you want your experts and you want specialists to be involved, but like you need to have somebody that's kind of owning this journey and able to sort of be the decision maker, right? So they have more skill sets than just like being a designer or being a user experience specialist. They might have both of those, and they're also strategic, and that's been successful for us as a vendor and as an outside party to helping these companies as we can sort of look at that journey as a whole, and it's not getting broken down as we toss it from group to group, but it is challenging to achieve that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's hard for the user when you look at that as well.
Yeah.
One thing that I like that you'd mentioned when we were talking about this too was using this also as an opportunity to go and see what your competitors are doing and how they're aligning it.
Yeah.
Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I mean, we look at a decent amount of things when we're starting a project. Obviously, the competitors are crucial, and we're reviewing those. But that's not the only thing that we look at, because you see a lot of the Me Too stuff happening and people copying things that aren't exactly the best way to approach a certain problem. What I think we have a little bit of an advantage with is that we're looking at just the nature of our business being an agency. We're looking at all different types of clients. We're looking at all different types of industries. And I think that that's helpful, for an internal team to consider too, is not just to look at your competitors, look at experiences that might have similarities from a journey perspective. It might be totally different content. It might be a totally different industry, but there's a lot of good takeaways that you can find outside of your particular area of focus that can be extremely valuable. And maybe that's going to give you an advantage over those competitors because you're bringing something in from a different space. So I think that's very important to not just look at your competitors, open up that lens a little bit.
And I love the idea of thinking about it beyond your competitors and even
Yeah.
beyond like people in your same space. There's
Yeah.
a lot that you can learn from stepping outside of your comfort
Totally.
zone and outside of your
Totally.
marketing box, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like with the work that we do, we're working with a brewery one day, and then we're working with, an enterprise company the next day. And we might have a cool idea that we were going to implement for the brewery that we bring over to the enterprise company, or, an idea from an app that we're going to bring into a website. So it's just, there's a lot of different ideas coming from different places. And it's because that lens is sort of opened wide, and we're kind of forced to do that being in our position. So I think for an internal team, it's really good to like make sure that that's something that you practice, is opening up that lens, looking outside of, your world.
I just love the idea of having to go from like a brewery to enterprise
Yeah.
and finding a way to marry
It's,
these two. Something that we were talking about, I won't name drop here, but there's a new VR
oh
that's out
yeah.
there that we're all curious about. And
Yeah.
something that you had brought up in our discussion when we were talking about this is just thinking about when now using this, you have all
Yeah.
these different social channels and everything in front of you, literally. How are you keeping that branding, and what does that look like if you've got branding on Instagram and X and LinkedIn literally in front of the user?
Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy concept to think about. I mean, as we move into this space, there's a lot of opportunities. We have been working on that for a number of months now, so we're very familiar with this spatial design experience, and it's pretty mind blowing. But I think what you're going to start to see is those experiences starting to become a little bit more mainstream. I think VR headsets over the past have been a little bit more focused in that gaming space, but now as we venture into that more mass adoption, which isn't going to happen immediately, but it will, right? How do those social experiences play out? And I mean, you might be moving through a virtual space and have, advertisements sort of in that mixed reality world. And I'm sure that there's plenty of people thinking about this right now, but it's going to get really interesting. And, I think, you could say it's going to be overwhelming. You might be really excited about it. There's a bunch of different ways. It's probably pretty controversial, to get into that world, but it could be really cool. I mean, you could be, I always had this idea of sort of this sort of virtual world where I'm, walking through downtown Los Gatos, and I might be, let's say I'm putting art on a wall, and I walk a little bit further, and there's some little, gamification element by a brand, that's tagged to a fire hydrant or something. I walk a little bit further down, there's some other element, but you could probably start to think about ways to really make that engagement much more interesting than just an advertisement on a screen, right? I think there's going to be opportunities for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting. And, to hear you say that some might be embracing and some might be scared. I think
Yeah.
most of us marketers are somewhere right there in the
Yeah.
middle,
Yeah.
trying to figure
Yeah.
out what this looks like and how this
Totally.
can work for our clients.
Yeah.
But it's, it is what it is with marketing. It changes as quickly as you understand it. So Doug, when we're talking about these different branding experiences, we tend to focus a lot on the social side and landing on the website, but how do you also take that brand and that experience offline? So when your sales team starts to have these conversations, or you start to meet with prospects in person, how do you convert all of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, and let me see if I can answer it correctly or with something thoughtful. But if I'm thinking about our experience, we've had areas where we've heavily influenced brands, and our creative has been adopted in a physical world. And I think there's a couple elements that get pushed externally outside of the digital space. But some of that can be the language that we're using on the website, the messaging, the visuals. And, one, for example, is just the work that we had done with one of our enterprise clients, extended out into their CS booth graphics, right? And so we're actually taking work that we did in a web space and we have all of the materials that we need and the vision that we need to extend that out into physical space. So, as you go to an event like CES and you start having these conversations and, this private booth space, maybe there's a conference room built into that booth space. You venture home and you're like, I want to do a little bit more research. I come to the website and again, there's that cohesive feeling, like everything is aligned. And so now I have, this hub where I've got all this information without, that salesperson there that keeps that sort of message and that same sort of theme running throughout my investigation into that product or software.
Love that. And I love how you're marrying it with the idea of events, because we know events are back now and people are starting to do these and put those booths together and have those interactions. So it's great to think about how this all comes together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's, if I was to be discussing something at a conference like that and then, come visit the website 3 weeks later and, it's not sort of aligned with the conversations that I was having. Again, it's all about removing that friction, removing the work on that audience, and, making it as easy as possible for them to take the next step in the journey, right? And all of those things really do matter. And all of those things also, relate to branding in just a way that, the brand is perceived, right? If you're going to that level of detail, if you can create that cohesion, the audience might not realize it, but it's starting to build a trust. It's starting to build a relationship. It's starting to build confidence within them to move forward. So I think it's not always clear as day why it's effective, but it is that perception, that you might not get a like perfect data point on, but you're going to start to see that over the long haul.
Yeah. I love that. So Doug, what's one thing that you think as marketers, if you were to say like, here's the main thing I want you to take away from this conversation?
I think the main thing that I want you to take away from this conversation is just that, you need to think about it as less, maybe it's less marketing versus product versus, brand. Like these things are really all connected and they need to be thought of as that journey. You need to be thinking about how all these things are speaking together and, really how intuitive and how seamless that flow is as I transition through each one of these areas, right? I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. Obviously, they are going to be, siloed in a sense, because you're going to have different people that are going to have to sort of be involved and have ownership in these. But like those people really need to be zooming out and thinking about that journey. I think that's a big takeaway, is just zoom out and have these people that are sort of in charge of these different areas, working very closely together and making sure that you have that seamless flow, because your success metrics for how your marketing performs, if you're getting a lot of engagement and you're getting a lot of, traffic to the landing page, but then you're not converting, then all that marketing doesn't really add up anyway. So I think that's the big takeaway. And for us, we're really playing, in that, that area of supporting that seamless flow between those. But as we get into that user experience, that's really where, as you start to venture from, that ad, you get on that landing page and you go through that conversion. That's kind of where we're focused our energy on mostly.
I like it. And that whole cohesion piece of it.
Yeah.
I think that's what tends to get missed a lot.
Yeah.
For sure. So Doug, is there anything in the industry right now that you're really excited about, or any projects that you guys are working on that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on one of the most exciting ones. The Vision Pro stuff is super exciting, and it's just, as designers, as creatives, just thinking about a whole new space to work in is pretty fascinating. We've been working in apps and websites for many, many years. There's a lot of patterns that get repeated, and there's things that there's still innovation happening, but it's a very familiar space. So like just to pull yourself out of that world and go, okay, you have an all new world to play in, with all new possibilities. That's super exciting. And to think of, some of the most impactful experiences in there, to just mix the real world with the virtual world it's pretty powerful. So one of the ones that we're working on right now is, it's immersive instruction. So imagine, you're building a new grill, in your backyard, and you can place a full-scale 3D model next to the physical grill that you're building and follow along step by step as this grill is building itself life-size, right? And I can get up and I can walk around that grill and I can look at the back of it and go, oh, that's where that screw goes, or whatever. So, that's really fascinating for us to play in that space. It's pretty interesting.
And what a neat way, as opposed to how we all have it now, which, figure 1B, and you're still trying to figure out what screw they're talking about in figure 1B that we're supposed to be doing. So
Totally. It's crazy. I mean, you can actually, pop up the virtual screw and spin it around in your view and compare it to the one that's in your hand. So, you're looking at it from all angles. And I mean, some of the angles on those directions, sometimes it's like you're holding the thing sideways, you're looking around, you're like, does part go this way or that way? But you can actually grab these parts, pick them up, stretch them out, look at them in a bigger view. And so a lot of cool things happening there. So that'd be a project that we're super excited about. It's a little different for us, and like I said, all new challenges. Yeah.
That's very cool. And now I'm just picturing you like outside with your Vision Pro on, putting together your next grill.
Oh, the photos that my wife has captured of me like doing stuff in the house with the Vision Pro are pretty funny. It's I get a lot of grief for that, but but we as designers and creatives, we embrace that technology and we look for the ways that we can utilize it in the world for good. And the opportunities are pretty impressive.
That's amazing. Yeah. Very cool. Well, Doug, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so exciting talking all these different branding ideas and concepts, and really how we put together the entire user journey here, and not forgetting any steps as we tend to sometimes. So
yeah,
we appreciate all of your insights and your expertise.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's been fun chatting with you, and it's been a good one.